A.
Discussion, a lot of speculation, quite frankly. And again, our philosophy has been just take it one day at a time. Take it one day at a time. Like I said, we've had communication. The communication's been good. I've talked to him multiple times. Coach Culley has talked to him multiple times. So again, we're just going to try to take it one day at a time and do what we feel is best.
Does that include traveling to Green Bay with the team this weekend?
Yeah, I would say more than likely that probably wouldn't happen. I wouldn't expect him to play.
No comment.
We try to focus on the team that we have here. And the one thing I like about this year, it's not a lot of beef going on. It's still early, but it's a lot. The coaches are all on one page. The players, there's a lot of new guys, but similar personalities, good guys, and we're meshing.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And it's finally here. It's game week, and the Texans are off to Green Bay this week, playing on Saturday night. And despite the circus, there is football just around the corner. Fired up for it, I suppose, or as much as you can be in this off-season. And fired up, as always, to speak to a guy who probably needs no introduction now. And I think you might now be, Brandon, the record holder for appearances on the podcast. So you're my number one guest now, I think, after today. But how you doing? You all right?
I'm doing good. That's an honor, man. I wouldn't have even considered that I might be.
Yeah.
What is this? Maybe appearance number 3 or 4 now?
Maybe 5, I think. Maybe 5.
Maybe
but,
yeah. So. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose, man.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm enjoying it, man, and I'm doing well. Glad to be on with you. Glad to be at training camp. I've been out there braving the Houston, Texas heat. I don't know how familiar you are with the Texas heat in Houston specifically, but we've been out there sweating, wearing 3 shirts a day, trying to give the most in-depth and accurate updates of what's going on at Texans training camp, and balancing the rest of the Houston sports landscape as well on top of that. So, but yeah, it's been a good time, man. I'm doing good.
Actually, probably my worst ever experience. I don't know if you'll probably remember this day, but do you remember the day the Astros parade downtown, and just kind of walked out the hotel, walked like 4 or 5 blocks along just to get on it. And then I just looked to myself and I didn't realize how much I was sweating it. And it was unseasonably warm, I think, that day, because what was that, November, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Even at that time of the year, it's hot. And I suppose you always, it's the only time you ever take a towel with you. I think sometimes you see a lot of guys doing that, and you saw that with Brevin Jordan doing it today after getting interviewed in the media. But yeah, the heat's real, and I think it can it sort of sneaks up on you a little bit as well. It's not a dry heat, is it? It's just it's a unrelenting one, I think.
Yeah, David Culley even talked about, and I could identify with this because I wear glasses as well. He talked about going, when you get out of your car, when you step from inside to outside, that your glasses fog up. That's how, if you're wearing glasses, that's how the heat hits you. Is you either sit there and let your glasses fog up, or you just know to take them off and allow allow yourself to get adjusted to the heat, and then put your glasses back on. It's that unrelenting. It is that humid and muggy. And yeah, especially with the practices, what's interesting is, and I was talking to some of the more seasoned reporters, the ones that could go back even further, and they remember when training camp practices, especially under Kubiak and before, they were much earlier in the morning. By the time we're out there, or by the time the players get out there, it's 9 o'clock and the sun's up. It's just come up. And we're in the thick of it. But man, it's really a joy though. It'd be hard to complain about. Just standing out there in the heat, watching some of the best athletes in the world do their thing, get ready for a season.
Yeah, that's right. And what's been your overriding thoughts then in terms of how it's set up, the coaches, and just the general kind of feel? I think, from reports, it feels a bit different this year. Obviously different from last year, but if you compare it to normal years, what's the changes been like under the new coaching staff?
Yeah, I think the biggest change, like you hear the word vibe, right? That's kind of a buzzword in camp with both the players and the media, is that the vibe is different. And I guess what that essentially means is that there's just a different there's just a different feeling around David Culley and this new staff. The personality difference I think is what stands out the most, and I think we probably pointed this out when David Culley was hired to begin with. Is just that these are just two totally different types of personalities, and what you have in Bill O'Brien and what you have in David Culley. Just sort of the surly, I think John McClain, longtime writer John McClain for the Houston Chronicle called him Mr. Teapot, nicknamed Mr. Teapot, or maybe that was actually what was the nickname around the Texans organization when he was there, because at any moment he could kind of tilt on you a little bit and it go kind of go the other way. Whereas with David Culley, there's just this kind of just this feeling of everyone's kind of getting along and is on the same page and is kind of moving in the same direction. As cliche as all of that sounds, now I think that in addition to that, when you listen to Bradley Roby and you kind of read between the lines a little bit with what the players are saying, is that it's not just, I don't think it's just the coaching staff. I think that's part of it, but just overall, like maybe even the new influx of players. Like I'm getting the sense now more than I did even last year covering them now with the players that are still around, that there were possibly factions within the locker room. There were maybe some strains, and you hear Bradley Roby talking about a lot of different things going on. Obviously, the Jack Easterby issues were highly publicized toward the end of the season by Sports Illustrated. And so you keep all of that in mind. Now, obviously, Jack Easterby is still there, still around, still very involved.
He's there high-fiving. You see him in all the videos.
He's out there high-fiving. I've spoken to him a couple of times, just kind of high and by here and there. He's out there every day and clearly involved. But to what extent isn't necessarily clear, because just the power dynamics and everything is just different from a management standpoint. So that's there. And so there's just a different feeling that things are a little bit more positive, even if the outlook on the team is nowhere near what it was, say, a year ago. Like, I don't think there was this idea that the Texans were going to be like Super Bowl contenders last year, but at least with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback, we're not quite on the 1 year anniversary of him having signed that extension yet. But you knew Deshaun Watson was going to be your quarterback. All of these other things that happened in the offseason with DeAndre Hopkins and things were in flux, but you felt better about the team, the outlook on the team. That's not necessarily the case now, but it does feel a bit more positive, even with the distraction of Deshaun Watson and that whole spectacle. You seem to have like a group of guys, like everybody's new. And so I think that part of that helps with just, everybody just out there trying to, make the most of their opportunity. So I noticed the difference that, the striking part about it is just all the new faces and trying to learn who's who, learn names. You still carry around your roster sheet, 10 days into practice, because you just want to be sure. So yeah, I mean, that the vibe thing, while it's been a buzzword, I think is an accurate characterization of it, is that it feels more positive, even if the team is not as good, because they don't appear to have a franchise quarterback, unless something's changing, right? Unless something is changing on their front.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. I think that Aikens was perhaps more sort of cutting in what he said. I think I tried to pick up the audio for the intro, but it was a bit faint. But he talked about, there's a discussion about things. He basically referenced that the previous coaching staff dictated the players. And the amount of different interviews and different position coaches that have come up that have talked about technique and intricacies of the position and actually coaching. You think, I think if you think you've probably got the biggest cloud you could ever have hanging over you as a team with your best player, arguably talent-wise, value position ever. Top 5 player in the league at his position, at the most important position in all sports. And despite that, the players seem pretty happy, and it seems like things are rolling in a direction that's, is positive in terms of trying to get ready for the season. But it just shows you how bad some of those factions, some of those some of the clashes of people in the building must have been, because you had Aikens talked about people actually speak to you when they walk past you, and I think, how bad was the atmosphere, and you wonder who that was, and we'll probably never know. But if you think about the guys that are gone, it might have been some of those, and it might not have been. But I think it's just a strange dynamic. I think that you can have essentially your whole franchise or your whole future in flux, but yeah, everybody's positive because the atmosphere was so kind of ill-fated and a bit toxic perhaps last season. So it just shows you how bad it was. But
I'll say on that though, I do think that there's something to be said for the difference in the player perspective versus the fan, observer, media perspective. Whereas we're looking at the team from a much larger picture view, bird's eye view of the team. Even though we're following the intricacies of it, we're looking at it from a bird's eye view perspective. Whereas with the players, I don't know if they really care about 2022. If 2021, 2022 depends on how 2021 goes for them, so they're just there trying to make it, so for them, they don't really care. Like the players that are returning obviously can speak to the different vibes and the differences between the coaching staffs, but for the most part, like even Jordan Akins himself is fighting for a job, or and at the very least fighting for a spot on the depth chart, even though he's likely to be on the team. So I mean, all of these guys kind of are looking at it from a very, very different perspective from the rest of us. On the coaching point that you made, I think is interesting. That I don't think that this can be hit home enough, but the Bill O'Brien coaching staff was basically a bunch of Bill O'Brien yes men, a bunch of guys that Bill O'Brien, that were loyal to O'Brien and that he trusted, and that if we're just honest about it and frank about it, they weren't necessarily guys that were going to buck or that were going to really challenge him intellectually beyond what he could handle, I think. And that's one of the things that I think is valuable. I talk about this all the time with Tim Kelly. I think it's so valuable. I'm not trying to convince you that, that Tim Kelly is Kyle Shanahan or something like that, but like I think there is value in him being a young offensive mind, and whatever he's learned from Bill O'Brien, good and bad, take it for what it is. But now he gets to go or be with other coaches and hear other voices and learn other things, implement other things into a system and see it from a different lens. I think that there's value in that for him. I think that is obvious for the players as well. And like having actual coaches who aren't just there because they're, because they're yes men to the sitting head coach. These are actual coaches. Like you look at some of the guys that Bill O'Brien had, John Perry and
John Perry's the worst one.
You just go down the list, and
in terms of resume, obviously Mike Devlin was the one that everyone
right. And I can't tell you how good of a coach or bad of a coach John Perry was, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the talent dictated the success of the receivers for the most part. But that's just an example. That's an anecdote of kind of what you got around here. One of my coworkers here at Sports Radio 610, our midday host, Landry Locker, calls them lingerers. A lot of just lingering faces and voices that probably you could have stood to have done away with a while ago. So I think the fact that it's all fresh, and whether you believe in it or not, the fact that it's all fresh and it's new, it is probably adding to the vibes, as they call them.
Yeah, I'll digress slightly, but I got a John Perry story for you. I don't think I've told this one before, but it was the week before the Colts game after the Texans played Seattle in 2017. We were doing a tour of the stadium and walked around, and I saw John Perry in the hallway, and I just said, "Hi, John, how you doing?" And he looked at me like he'd just seen a ghost. And we did a tour, and and we were looking out. You go up to the top level of the press box, you look out across Kirby, and you can see the practice field. They were coming down, and somebody got a text, and they said, "Have you seen the news?" I said, "No, I don't know. What's the news?" So we got in the car, and then NFL Network's usually, the app sort of flicks on. It's probably about sort of 10 minutes behind the sort of first wave of Twitter kind of updates. and it was because Deshaun had torn his ACL, and that was the ghost that he'd seen, obviously, because him and Roland Ramirez were having a really kind of in-depth conversation, and I always wondered why. But before we jumped back in the car and we saw all the messages, literally was speaking to Mark Vandermeer for like 15, 20 minutes outside. I think they were giving it like free ice cream or something that day. This must have been in the good days where all the staff wanted to work there. But it was, yeah. And I asked him the next time I saw him if he knew at that point. I don't think he did, because he just talked us complete anonymous. I don't think even he'd heard the news yet. But I must have just, you get into the sort of bowels of the stadium, just saw that, what it's like when a bad, the worst possible probably news in season that could happen to you. And you saw it the raw reaction to it there. And obviously that's probably one of the worst Sundays ever at NRG against the Colts when Savage came in and missed the fourth down conversion later on, didn't they, to tie the game. But and it just, absolutely lifeless after what a great start. But anyway, that's a John Perry story for you. But yeah, he wasn't a very good coach, I don't think. And
that feels like 10 years ago now.
Oh,
because of all of what's happened.
Yeah,
that was 4 years ago.
Yeah, tell them.
It feels like moons ago.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And I think if you think of all the sort of changes, and obviously it was power dynamics. I watched O'Brien's interview or his press conference for Alabama just yesterday. He's not changed a bit. And I, in some ways I was watching it, I think, well, I kind of miss him in some ways, but I think that his biggest weakness was that he didn't evaluate people around him, and he was so stubborn that he couldn't have those checks and balances, and that's why we're in this position. But when you think of the current power dynamics, Brandon, what do you think about Caserio, and what's that been look like, or what's that look like observing at training camp? Because my first thought was, well, he's more than just a GM. He's out there coaching. You could see he was talking about route compositions with a video I saw with Tim Kelly today. He's literally got his fingerprints on everything right across the football operation, which is great, I think, because we've had nothing anywhere, anybody remotely willing to take control of the situation, despite sort of Matt Bazergan and James Litford still being here. They went through it as well. So, people don't point to them enough, I think, at times. Obviously, you talked about used to be there, but what does it look like with Caserio in action? Because my first thought is, because we all know really, and we'll come on to Culley, but it feels temporary in many ways. And I heard Seth Payne talk about that actually yesterday, and he said one of the players repeated to Seth that the Easterby said this is probably going to take more than one coach to fix. Not that anybody, no, that's no news to anybody. But certainly it probably just hits home the fact, or that it's a reality. But my first impression was if he was going to act like that with another head coach, like a real bona fide Brian Daboll, whoever it might be, Matt Eberflus, would they like that level of that interaction on the training field? Because you certainly didn't see Rick Smith out there. You certainly didn't see Brian Gain the visor and telling wide receivers how to pivot and what have you.
Yeah, so it is interesting that he is as involved as he is coaching wise. I mean, for the most part, from when I'm observing Nick Caserio, he's standing further back from the action and taking notes. But his interaction much more so is with the other coaches than the players more so. And he does interact with the players some, but he interacts with the coaches a lot. And what I can only glean from that, and obviously he does have a coaching background, and is not it's not that strange to see him out there coaching, knowing his coaching background or appearing to coach a little bit. Well, all I can gather from it is that they, it seems like they actually, must at the very least respect whatever, they at least respect his background as a coach. And then beyond that, I think what has stood out to me is that it does still appear like he's allowing them to do their jobs. Like he's not out there overbearing and like interfering. It does appear, and again, I'm not listening to what the conversations are exactly, so I can't tell you what's being said, but it does appear like more of a collaboration. I can tell you, I can just point out to you, they were doing an 11-on-11 drill, and Nick Caserio's doing that thing that I just mentioned where he's standing behind the action. And so is Greg Jackson, the safeties coach. And you can just see them going back and forth after every play. And just based off of the interaction, I can't hear what they're saying, but based off of what I could tell from the interaction, it looked like Greg Jackson was explaining every bit of the play and the breakdown of what was going on to Caserio. Like, it was Caserio asking questions and wanting to learn more about what they were trying to do conceptually. And so I'm saying all of that to say to hit home the point of collaboration. It does not appear like he's meddling as much as he is just as, involved and maybe in some ways curious to want to know, why are we doing this? What's the logic behind that? So, and I've seen other interactions like that with some of the other, position coaches and assistant coordinators and whatnot. So that's my impression of it, is that they, I don't know what they actually think of him as a coach, and I agree. I tend to agree with you that maybe a more of an alpha type would there could be some conflict with that. But I think that's part of the reason why David Culley was hired, right? And we've been saying this since the beginning, was because, I don't want to say it's just because he could be influenced, but because I think that there could be like more of a buy-in from somebody who's really glad for the opportunity, didn't think he'd ever get to be a head coach. And here's a guy who has expected to be a general manager for a long time. Like Nick Caserio's story is different from David Culley's. He's not surprised to be here or just happy to be here. He's wanted to do this for a while. So I think that all of that is consistent with the logic of what they were trying to do and what they were trying to accomplish. Get a coach in here that could more so buy in, kind of sell whatever the message that ultimately is probably Nick Caserio's.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you think there's a line between being involved and understanding or taking the coach's role away from him. But as you said, I don't think neither of them are playing the traditional role as we know it, which I think probably goes back to that point we talked about previously of some things kind of feel the same in this regime as they did prior. But certainly, I think there was non-traditional roles. We found that didn't work too well.
Right. Well, and that's what I think it is worth pointing out, man. Like the collective we, I'm not saying you or myself individually, but the collective we criticized Bill O'Brien for trying to do too much, right? Like, it was a criticism that Bill O'Brien, who was at best, a slightly above to average head, an okay head coach, trying to be the head coach and the general manager. And we're like, what's this guy think he's doing? Going to try to pull double duty here. And it's like, we're thinking the head coach can't also be the general manager. So now we have the inverse of that. And can the general manager be the head coach? And we have no evidence to suggest at this point that Nick Caserio is, a great general manager. He is in his first year at that as well. So it's like, how do we know that this guy could handle all of these roles? I mean, that is the other side of the argument. Like, can he be all of these different things, or is his role better served to just, stick to the traditional GM roles that you think of? Or is it beneficial to have a guy who's the GM that can also give you some input in coaching and technique and put on a headset and help you with play calling or whatever it is that they think he's going to end up doing, or whatever he decides he's going to end up doing?
What did you make of Culley's role? I mean, I know he's out there going full MC in the bucket hat before training, trying to give the fans, and I think that probably, generally speaking, the type of fans, and I heard, I think it was one of the guys on 610 talking about some of the questions that the fan, the type of fans that were there had, in terms of, is Deshaun being, in some legal trouble, and, kind of sort of stuff that was, you'd think, your average diehard or your average informed fan would know. So he's obviously out there giving a bit of a rousing speech to try and get some cheers, which I would suggest, considering some of the feedback that he had then on the type of fan that was there, then it might, and obviously broadly speaking, if you were there, I don't think, not necessarily you're in that bucket, but what do you think of the sort of kind of role that he's playing? Because it seems reserved in some ways, but then it's almost like he's there to take the Deshaun questions, and he is a bit of a kind of patsy in many senses. But then, with the same token, Caserio is out in front of the media, probably more than you'd expect a GM to. I think by league rules there's 6 opportunities to speak to the GM a year. And Caserio's out there every week, multiple times almost. So it's a strange dynamic, I think, isn't it? One that they're obviously trying to create a narrative and a perception. But yeah, it seems uncomfortable at times and almost a little bit forced. And I don't know if that's just trying to create a perception in front of the fans. But what have you made of Culley's role and all that kind of the front that they're given through the PR side of it?
Well, I do think that one thing that they want to do or are trying to do, and I don't think they're always succeeding in that, and part of it I don't think is necessarily their fault, but they're trying to play to everybody's strengths. Like that is a theme on the football team, and I think that is a theme maybe throughout the building. And David Culley is a happy, joyful person. Like he I think serves as a hype man just fine. Someone to go out and talk to the crowd, and he just seems like a very simple man. And I think there's some connectivity there with just the average fan and the average person who's out there, still following the team at this point. So I think there's some utility there, and the ideal role for David Culley is to be the positive public face, kind of what we were talking about earlier. Just a different. Bill O'Brien was never that way. Like he
would never given a speech.
No, and if he did, it'd be forced. Like that. Yeah. Like he is the opposite of what a hype man would have been. So I think there's some utility. The issue is with David Culley is that they've run into conflict, and he's not a seasoned public speaker. He's not someone who's been out front and in front of the microphone a lot and had to do a lot of these press conferences and speak to a lot of whatever issues were on the different teams that he's been on. He's been in the background for the most part, not even as a coordinator. To me, him having not been a coordinator, that stuck out. The fact that it meant that he hadn't really done a lot of media, that stuck out to me more than just necessarily even the football part. Because I was fully willing to concede that he could know plenty of football at 60-something years old and having been around football his whole life. Him not having coordinated an offense didn't necessarily bother me as much as it meant this guy hasn't been out front. He hasn't been, in center a lot, So, and at that time, we already had the issue with Deshaun Watson as far as wanting to be traded. We had the trade request already. Didn't have all of the other stuff off the field. But as all of that develops, it makes it even more contentious and it makes it even more awkward and difficult for this inexperienced public speaker who's really there to be positive and for his positivity, who's not necessarily the best with conflict management and how to deal with some of these Deshaun Watson questions. And like, I don't know if it's gotten much better with Culley in answering the Deshaun Watson questions. No. Like it's only gotten slightly better in that he doesn't like go on and he talks less.
Yeah.
I think saying less has helped him, but it still hasn't been good. Right. So it's actually been pretty bad. So on that front, I don't think that I honestly don't think that the Texans anticipated that he would have to be the guy out front on an issue like this, because they didn't have that when he got hired. They could have, I think they could have dealt with the Deshaun, trade request, honestly, while all this other stuff, he's probably gone already. Right. He's probably, he might even be traded by the draft. They may never have to deal with it anyway. So I don't know, man. It is interesting, but I feel like I understand what David Culley's utility is supposed to be. And it's supposed to be positive. Things have been negative. So now we want to be positive. We're going to bring in this positive guy who can connect with people and seems relatable and all that sort of thing. So that to me is consistent with like just the logic of why you would bring a guy in like that. But as far as coaching, We just talked about it. Like, it seems like Nick Caserio might actually be the head coach, and then David Culley is then the coach or the associate, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's sort of the impression that you get.
And it's odd, I think, as well, because, it almost pains him to lie, I think, in times, doesn't it? Because you saw when he gave the no comment today, if Deshaun would play in future preseason games. And he has got better at it, but there's some time. But I think that they've almost awkwardly handled it at times. Day to day, he's not got the reps, so he's not going to play when that's something you can control. They're the ones scripting his practice, and they could give him third team reps would be better than watching Jeff Driscoll sail out of bounds.
See, the no comment. I'm glad you brought that up, because the no comment on that, I'm standing right there and I'm like, oh God, that's the worst. That's next to the worst answer that you could give, because you're avoiding, you're evasive, and it obviously it's ambiguous. So it's not an answer to the question. Whereas you could have still been ambiguous, but you could have said, hey, you know what? We're just worried about Green Bay right now. We don't have time to focus. He's probably not going to play against the Packers, and we'll worry about next week when next week comes. This is a week-to-week league, or like that. That was the time to give the coaching cliches. There's a time for it, and that was it. And he gave no comment. And I'm still like, oh no, goodness gracious, that's not it.
He followed it up with almost like a revolting twitch. I don't know if you noticed that. Anyway, like with his neck, as after he said no comment.
Well, because he's trying to go to the next question. He wants to find the next person that's going to ask the non-Deshaun question.
Yeah, so, I think it's a challenge from and he could have said, like, I've just answered that question. Next question, please. It would have been, that would have been as dismissive, but perhaps not as necessarily awkward. I think he's probably fumbled his way through that, and I think it's good that we've got a game coming up, because we'll be able to see him. Does he add actually value in terms of directing the team? Not necessarily timeouts and challenges are going to be that important in a game like this, obviously, but certainly, does he manage the game well? Because he's not got many responsibilities. He's certainly not calling plays, and he's not trying to do too much like we've seen in the past, because both our last two head coaches have called plays, invariably the whole time. So it's a lot to take on. So yeah, if he manages to take that CEO role into a game and it goes off without any blaring hitches, some odd decisions going it for fourth down your own end zone. O'Brien was littered with them because it's a lot to process, calling plays and then trying to manage a game as well. So as long as he can do that, I think he'll fulfill that role in a way that he was designed to do. But certainly, I think in front of the media, he's learned a lot of harsh lessons early, I think. So guys that were in front of the media today were the three top draft picks in the rookie class: Davis Mills, Brown, Jordan, Nico Collins. What's been your sort of observations of those three guys thus far?
Yeah, so let's start with Davis Mills, the quarterback.
Yeah, disappointing was a headline. One of them.
That's been and it's been highly discussed. And I mean, I'm just gonna tell you, as someone who's been out there watching, it has not been good. It has not been promising. Now, I might not be the best witness to this, because I'm on record of having not been in favor of that draft pick to begin with. I didn't like any of the quarterbacks that were available in that spot at the time. So I am, this is for me consistent with what I was expecting, maybe a little worse even from what I was expecting. Now, it hasn't been all bad. Like, everything that he does out there is not bad. I think that maybe the fact that I thought about this, maybe sitting with some of the other media, that we don't tweet out and video and photograph every good thing that he does. We don't necessarily tell you guys about every single thing that looks normal or routine or good, positive. So in some ways, there's an imbalance in the impression that y'all are getting from him, or that y'all are getting about him, just from observing the folks that are out there. But I will say, and I know we're talking about the rookies, Davis Mills has not been the worst quarterback in camp by any stretch.
Yeah.
That title goes to one Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which makes you think, what the fuck did Ryan Finley do to piss them off that badly after trading from him?
I literally was just saying this to, was it either maybe Cody Davis from the Locked On Texans podcast? I think was who I was speaking about, or speaking to this same point about, like, man, how bad was that guy? Never mind the fact that they traded for him. How bad must he have been in minicamp? Or OTAs even for this to be for this to be what they ended up with, for them to cut the guy that they traded for this guy, so it's very obvious to wrap up on Mills that he is going to be the backup quarterback unless they bring another guy in, because it's not going to be Jeff Driscoll. Driscoll's more than likely, if he sticks around, if he even makes it, would be on the practice squad, and you could expect Davis Mills to be the backup quarterback if things play out the way we expect, with Tyrod Taylor being the starter and Davis Mills being the backup. But it has not been great. And someone asked me on social media, does it seem to be more so accuracy or timing? Is he trying to fit it into tight windows? Like, what seems to be the issue exactly? They wanted me to be specific. And if I'm honest, man, it's all of it. It's all of it. Like the accuracy is a little bit inconsistent, but more so an issue of timing, being a little bit late on throws, the anticipation just not quite there on an NFL level yet. Clint Sterner, standing next to Clint Sterner for a couple of these, former quarterback, who at the very least knows what a rookie maybe should look like at this point, and it's just not there. It's honestly not there, and so that's a little bit disappointing. When you think about that's your third round pick, and you figure, it's one thing to fail on a pick. I'll never be one who's up in arms about failing on a pick, but just the idea that maybe that wasn't really the spot to go anyway for me. Like maybe could you have gone in a different position, got a more impactful player there, especially knowing that players were flying off. That was an issue for you, not having any early picks. You saw players flying off the board that you liked. So to use that on a quarterback who, for me, just didn't have much more upside past to being a backup anyway, it just disappointing. Was hoping to go in there and see Davis Mills really look impressive, and that doesn't mean that the book is written on him, that'll never be anything, but the initial impression is not a great one. Now, that's the bad news. The good news and the great news: Nico Collins. Let me tell you, man, there's something there. Like, there is something there. Like, you asked about the guys that just stand out physically, the guys that you watch them in individual drills, in 7-on-7, 11-on-11, whatever it is, and they just stand out, and you're like, whoa, who's that guy? Wait. Say you don't know.
He's changed his number twice, isn't he? I think so.
Yeah. Like, even if you know who he is, you go, who's that guy?
Yeah.
Who's that? Even if you're like just rhetorical to yourself. And Nico's one of those guys. Anthony Miller, I know we're talking about the rookies. Anthony Miller's one of those guys. Laramie Tunsil obviously is one of those guys. You're like, whoa, wait, that guy's different. That guy's different from everybody else in his position group, So Nico already looks like that. Like, you think about it, the best comp physically, right, is, and Chris Conley's looked fine, but the best comp physically is going to be Nico Collins and Chris Conley as the sort of the big body guys, or tall, lanky sort of receivers that you have on the team, or at least in camp right now. Yeah. And again, Chris Conley's been fine. Nico stands out, just different physically. So I've been very impressed with him and have enjoyed watching him so far, because obviously the storyline behind the Nico Collins pick, and I wish, he was on In the Loop, my guys here at Sports Radio 610. He was on there.
Yeah, just listening out in the car.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to speak with Nico today for a number of reasons. But if I had been, I would have loved to have just asked him if he has any kind of appreciation for what it means to trade up for a guy. Like, I don't know if a guy coming out of college is trying to make the league really, if it really registers with him when a GM trades up for you, and what the picks mean, and how fans view that, and, how that colors the evaluation of him as a player, And so I've always wondered that, like, what is a guy's awareness of that? Does he even Does it motivate him? Is it a chip on the shoulder? Like, I don't know. Like, how does the guy even view that, if he views it at all? And I'd love to know. But that is the story, right? Like, you made a move to go up and get the guy again because you saw guys flying off the board. And so, to me, like, the Davis Mills pick is what it is, but the Nico Collins pick, to me, almost kind of has to work. Like that is to me that's a very important move.
But you gave up equivalent of a third, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's a very important move in selection in evaluating both Nick Caserio and this regime, let's say, because he's not by himself.
Yeah.
So evaluating them as a whole in drafting and trading. Like, what's the value of a trade? What's the value of a draft? All of that. How did they do? So I think there's a little bit of pressure on him, not that he feels it necessarily or even has an appreciation for what I'm saying, which I kind of hope for his sake that he doesn't even view it that way. But very, very, very fun watching Nico Collins out there. And then Brevin Jordan has been fine, I think, but has not stood out the way that I expected him to. I'll say that because and I know he's a rookie and everything, but I did, at the time, we're hearing everybody say, hey, this could be the best pick that they had. This could be and I'm not seeing that right now. That guy's Nico, the most impressive rookies for me, honestly, so far, just for whatever camp's worth. The most impressive rookies have been Nico Collins and Roy Lopez.
Right. Roy's getting a run by the ones.
Well, so every now and then, for the most part, it's with the twos. But you got to understand also, like with the ones, I was trying to explain this to somebody else, but every now and then the ones will look different. Like Laramie Tunsil's the one, right? But sometimes he's not running in the drills, and Roger Johnson's the one. And they'll do that along the line, So you have your idea of who the ones are. But then you'll look out there and there's a hodgepodge mix of guys who are ones and twos, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not always, and I don't know if they do that to mess with us too, because there is a little thing about them
you're not allowed to tweet it. Yeah.
Who's the one and who's the two? I don't know if that's a mind bleep with us too or what, but I haven't tried to read too much into ones and twos as I see them, as much as who's making plays. Because some of the ones we know, like Laramie Tunsil's the starting left tackle. Like some of these guys we know who are going to be the ones. But I try to focus on who's performing and then make a lot of these. That's why the value, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the value of the preseason games. I think that'll dictate and determine a lot of what the depth ends up looking like ultimately. But Brevin Jordan, it's not. I don't mean that as a knock or a negative. I'm just saying it has not flashed just yet. But it's one of the reasons why I'm excited to see him in the preseason and what that looks like in actual competition. To the point about him, since we're talking about him, I think there's something to be said for the position group that he's in. That, I mean, Pharaoh Brown is just the best guy there right now. He is the one, the tight end that stands out amongst the group. I know there's a lot of belief and hope with Jordan Akins and having been a draft pick and everything. And if people are holding out for Culley Waring, who always stands out because he's just in the dynasty. Like looks like a god out there just physically, but I'm talking about, like, when you talk about football, like actually making plays and doing things with the football. I mean, that guy's Pharaoh Brown. When you're watching the tight ends, can't help to kind of fixate on that guy, especially ever since he came back with the COVID stuff and everything. So, I don't know if Brevin's suffering a little bit from that. He's just got other guys between Brown, Pharaoh Brown, Jordan Akins, Ryan Izzo has stood out a little bit, to my surprise. And I don't know if that's just because they've had him doing a lot because Pharaoh was out for a while. But if that was my assessment of the top guys, I'd say Nico's the only one who has stood out. Davis Mills, as has been widely reported, and I can confirm for you, has been underwhelming.
Yeah.
And Brevin Jordan is just right there. Kind of, I would put him on the status quo.
Yeah, and I suppose how much do you think do you have to take with a pinch of salt all these training camp reports? Because I've got 4 for you here, right? This is from last year, so I looked up some from last year, and obviously there's Trindon, Holiday. I mean, even Culley wearing last year or 2 years ago in Green Bay joint practices, rave reviews. Guy's going to be something. Gets concussion, mysterious injury. Goes on various lists and doesn't see much playing time. But so last year, just did a quick search. So it said John Reed has had the best camp out of all the rookies. That was one that came out last year. Played a handful of snaps in the first quarter against Kansas City because Lonnie Johnson tweeted before the game he was only in by punishment, and he plays in very, very limited snaps all year. A.J. Moore had a great camp. Maybe could have been true if he didn't get injured against Pittsburgh week 4 because he was rotating in as a third safety. David Johnson looks lethal. That was another one that came out last year, which again, maybe for half the first game was accurate. And this is
real quick before you go to the next one on David Johnson. He does look lethal, similar to the Culley Warren situation, because physically the guy is just put together and is just physically impressive. So I think in shells, with not actual football and no competition, he does, even to this day, even though we know better now, for sure, he does look lethal.
And then the best one, which was and I suppose it was true in some ways, but it says, and I'm not repeating who it was, but it was a certain journalist for a paid subscription news site, says the defense is going to be exotic and bring a lot of different types of blitzes this year.
Oh man, dude, we all did that. I don't know who that is, but I'll fall on the sword for whoever it is, because we were fed that. Everyone was fed that. Anthony Weaver was a guy, Anthony was a guy that we all liked and wanted to succeed. And so I think we just kind of believed in it. Maybe we overlooked the fact that they didn't have a lot of talent. And, there were a couple of things that went south too, between Garyon Conley and this catastrophic thing with the ankle, surgery, him never coming back, him having no answer for their second corner, and things just kind of falling apart. That it's funny. We all thought that. We were like, oh man, exotic blitzes. This is going to be great. Can't wait. Yeah. And then we're like, oh, but you know what? They're not any good. They're going to have to play. They're going to have to do their best to play zone. They can't really man up with anybody. This is not, there's no talent here. And now this year it's like, oh, everything's simple. We're simplifying everything, and we're just gonna let guys rip, see ball, get ball. So it's just trying to go the opposite of what was the narrative of last year. But all of us fell for that banana and tailpipe last year, man. It was not good. It was not
I suppose it was exotic in the sense that you had a guy who you brought in and paid for safety. You played him in the slot. You drafted a corner in the second round, and then you moved them to safety without telling them pre-season or on the off-season.
Yep.
You then brought in a slot corner and put him on the boundary, and then you brought a guy who wasn't even a practice squad player and made him play the boundary. So that was exotic in the sense that you really mixed it up. It was certainly unusual, but it wasn't effective.
You benched a guy for tweeting. You benched a guy in the season opener against the defending Super Bowl champions. You benched him for tweeting and played a rookie.
Yeah.
Who's not spectacular.
Yeah.
So it was very exotic. It was very exotic. You forced, and I don't even know if forced is the right word. I have to go back and look at all 9 of the turnovers, but stat says that, you forced the fewest. What was it? The fewest turnovers in? I don't know how
1968 or something like that.
Yeah, it was J.J. Watt tied for the lead in interceptions with 1.
Yeah. And I would say the only quality one, like the only break on the ball, like quality interception is probably Bradley Roby's one in Tennessee. I think that was the only few that actually made it. And I suppose when you hear all that, I suppose sidetracking a little with his defense, but when you hear about, it's simplified, I've got less of a role. It's it's a more of a straightforward, division of responsibility in all 3 levels of the defense. You think, why doesn't, when you hear that, I keep thinking to myself, why doesn't every coach do that? If you don't have a unit of players who've been together for 2 or 3 years, and you can allow those wrinkles, and you can set, and I remember like Trinell, like in the 17-18 season, would set traps, and you'd get players to attack zones and transition into space to try and get the quarterback to throw in it, and you could see that on the tape. But what's the hesitancy? I know, and I think it's a league where everybody's got egos and they're trying to outthink and outcoach each other, but that just kind of seems to me that we didn't have the quality of players to try and operate the scheme, which is not breaking news, by the way, but it just shows you how much guys were being asked to do and how much they were being asked to consider every snap, and it was almost freezing them from just doing the basics, and tackling being the biggest one last year.
Yeah, and with the defense specifically, we talk about factions. I'm not trying to put anything out there that there was a beef between position groups, but we had, if we go back and look at it, and it's probably still the same question mark, because Zach Cunningham, pretty elite player. Terrell Adams was fine for what he was. Not an elite player by any means, but fine for what he was. Linebacker play, all right. But up front and in the back and on the back end, like, these guys couldn't cover, they couldn't rush. And there was a feeling, I talked to at least one defensive lineman that played on the team last year who thought, man, if these guys could cover, we could get to the quarterback. That was part of the feeling. And so they knew that they didn't have the personnel to do pretty much any of the things that they wanted to.
Yeah, and scheme change aside, I suppose, and it goes maybe back to that Nico Collins bit as well, that we've not really added many guys, and I know they're being asked to do different responsibilities, and there's going to be a lot more zone. There'll be probably an extra safety in there most of the time. You're going to be covered to zone. It's kind of a little bit harder to throw into. You're going to have maybe 4 guys. You've now got probably an extra linebacker dropping into coverage to fill up that second level zone, and make it make the quarterback read and react a little bit quicker. But that all being said, there hasn't been an investment. There isn't a player in there that we've brought in that think, yeah, that guy's going to go make a difference. And I think that's I suppose going back to that previous point of these are reports of training camp. You got to take them a pinch of salt. But that being said, we have had the pads on for the last couple of practices, and that's where you start to tell a bit of it. And obviously we'll see in Green Bay. But since the pads have gone on, is there any guys that have stuck out to you that you thought, yeah, now it looks different when we're kind of getting towards real football in inverted commas?
Yeah, for me, it's Pharaoh Brown, man. It's Pharaoh Brown. The defensive line, I would say, in general, since the pass came on. So, of course, we all know this, but just to reiterate, can't really evaluate the offensive line when they're out there in T-shirts and shorts, right? Yeah. The offensive line doesn't have pads. You can't really evaluate football at all, but you certainly can't evaluate the offensive defensive line if they're out there just, playing patty cake and slapping hands and whatnot. So what has stood out to me more than anything since the pass got on is that whether you want to say that the offensive line is bad or the defensive line is good, I don't think you can say fairly since they're playing against each other. But you could say that the defensive line seems to have a leg up on the offensive line. Like when you look at those one-on-one drills and when you kind of check them out in competition, those guys right now seem to be better. So that is what has stood out to me more than anything. I think about Shaq Lawson as somebody who I was hoping would flash more, but hasn't. Like I can remember going, thinking when they first put the pads on, like, where is Shaq Lawson? And then I had to seek him out in some of the individual drills. But then you go look at the individual drills, and he looks pretty good. He looks pretty good once you really key in on him, but it just hasn't really necessarily come together for me in the, in more of the 11-on-11 stuff. There's a couple more.
Just where you're on that, just before you come back to that, I think that the Pharaoh Brown one is a really interesting one because, he's a guy that almost lost his leg in college and he was a big time player in Oregon. And I know that, the Pac-12, it's probably not the best breeding ground for for tight ends because they're I mean the style that's played in that conference is what it is, but I think I think there's, and I know that's been said about Davis Mills, and it's easy conjecture, right? And it's an easy sort of forecast to make about somebody. But I think there was definitely an assertion around people close to that program. If he hadn't have had the injuries he had, he would have been a lot more touted, valued prospect when he came out. And obviously then went to Oakland and then bounced to Cleveland, but he said that, and he said, "Look, this is my first ever press conference today," and he said, I came here because I was behind guys that were making $10 million a year, and there was nobody like that on this roster. That's why I came here when I got asked. He's never had a chance, and I think, and albeit Watson was throwing him in the ball, but at the end of last season he looked like a starting tight end, particularly week 17. I thought, this guy's got it, I think, and we've probably not had a big body guy. I know Fells had a good year in 19. He probably filled that role as best we have done since probably CJ Fedora was. But I think, just while we're on the tight ends, Brandon, I think there's definitely a perception that there's going to be a short, sharp passing game where the Titans are going to be involved in a lot in this short to intermediary routes, curls, quick outs, kind of easy stuff for the quarterback to take matchups on. And you could probably argue in some ways that if you've got a unit, and albeit tight ends, you take a lot less, but if you've got a unit where you've got a 2019 third round draft pick in real danger of not making the roster, I think they might take 4 rather than 3, just because I think they want to play some sort of bigger sets at line of scrimmage if they're going to be committed to running the ball. But I think that probably is a testament to the strength of that group. If you've got a draft pick or a recent draft pick in the third round likely not to make the roster, or is in certainly danger of not making it.
Yeah. I'm thinking that through as you're talking about it, that certainly like Pharaoh Brown's on the roster, guys. Just breaking news, he's gonna make it. Brevin Jordan, I feel safe saying that he's gonna make it because they drafted him and they're gonna at least give him some time to figure it out. So there's 2 that I would consider locks. Then you start to talking about, okay, Jordan Akins, you feel like is probably the third guy, but is it Ryan Izzo? Au Claire that they brought in from Tampa has been out there. So you're like, okay, is he seems to be like fighting for that third spot. I don't know if that means he's third on the depth chart, but that is where I have him fighting for the third spot. And it does bode well for you when a guy who you've liked, who you've seen and have been impressed with at times, when that guy is fighting for a spot on the roster, you do feel like you've done some upgrades or at least seen some things there from, like, because I know Pharaoh was obviously on the team last year. But yeah, no, I mean, he's one of the guys that stood out. And just to kind of reiterate what you were saying about the short routes. I mean, first of all, with Pharaoh, I would point out that, the difference with Pharaoh and Darren Fells, and really the reason why he stands out more than anybody is, I mean, obviously he's a big guy, he's a big dude, but I mean, he's a dog in the run game. Like he is an adept pass catcher and a guy who, the 21st century tight end that you envision, and is also a badass when it comes to, getting after it in the run game. So, and I don't know if you tell me if you agree with this or not, but I don't know if they've really had a dog. They haven't had really a dog like that.
Joe Dreesen, maybe something like that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's, you have to go back, and certainly, disrespect to
James
Fells,
Casey, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, they don't. But he is that, So I think that stands out. And then again, to the point about the short and intermediate routes in the passing game, that is going to be the identity of the passing game, at least. And that's why I look for Pharaoh and the tight ends in general, just as a group. I look for them to be, a formidable group, and also the slot receivers and, Anthony Miller, and he's flashed. Anthony Miller's been really impressive, just physically. Like I was talking about earlier, those guys are like, wait, who's that guy? He's one of those.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out with the slot. If it's, if Kiki QT makes the team, how involved he is in the offense and all of that. But these guys, these slot guys and tight ends, and the fact that all of the running backs that they've put on the team are pass catchers, and like these guys are going to be very important in what what the passing game is ultimately going to look like, because that's what the personnel dictates. So, obviously, if your quarterback is Tyrod Taylor and not Deshaun Watson, as we expect it to be. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Pharaoh is somebody that I'm really watching to have, I don't want to over dramatize and call it a breakout year, but I expect it to be really solid.
Just sort of dawning me there with slot receivers. I still can't quite get my head around how they managed to get that Randall Cobb contract off the books, but it just shows you when you've got got an influential quarterback.
A little bit. Sometimes you need a little bit of luck. That's why I think that is a perfect example of why it is so risky to call your shot and to say what could never happen.
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm not much of a betting man, but so I don't really gamble a lot, but I would have been comfortable telling you that, Randall Cobb's going to be on this football team.
Yeah.
Because ain't nobody trading for that, there are some teams that might still like Randall Cobb, but not at the amount that Bill O'Brien decided to pay him, but there is one person other than Bill O'Brien who thinks that Randall Cobb is worth his contract.
As a quarterback.
And it's Aaron Rodgers, which matters, that matters. If it was, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I don't know, just name somebody who's not influential in their organization. If it was somebody like that, who cares, right? But it's Aaron Rodgers, a disgruntled Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers who, I don't think he was really flirting with retirement, but who was giving that vibe, type of thing. So, I mean, I think that is an example of luck and how luck can, sometimes that is a factor. And they're very lucky to be able to get rid of that contract. Yeah,
I think it's just we've done it a year earlier, so I think that's with kind of similar dead money to what you would have done if you'd have walked away from it next year. So it's a good move, and you pick up a late draft pick, and it's what it is.
And to be able to replace them with essentially be able to replace them with what is, I think, to me, objectively a better player at this point.
Cheaper.
In 2021, cheaper and better.
Yeah, and I think you've got a chance to keep him in house, because I know Caserio. I think we've got 24 players on 1 year contracts of the 40 that signed something like that. So
that sounds right.
Yeah, and I think when people were kind of like, "Oh, Caserio said he's not gonna wait till the off season to re-sign guys," and I was thinking, like, you better hope not, because he'll not be able to get through them, by the off season. It just simply won't be possible. If you just say you wanted to bring back law of averages, 6-8 of those guys, even trying to get through the 6 or 8 contracts is going to be really difficult if you're seeing them as a priority. You don't want them to hit free agency. So I was thinking, well, he's going to have to.
You'll be holding tryouts, and you'll have guys out there who, who don't look anything like pros.
I just had sort of visions of booking out that Marriott Marquise, the one with the Texas Lazy River up the top, the Texas state-shaped Lazy River, for anyone who doesn't know. But I just had a vision of him speed dating all the agents to try and get all the contracts negotiated at the end of the season. Because if there's a number of guys you want to keep on this roster, and hopefully there is, then he's going to have a lot of work to do. And it's going to be probably even busier off season, because you're going to have that whole wave of retaining guys in house and whatnot. But and in terms of the run game, there's a couple of points here. So in terms of the run game, that's obviously that was a fundamental flaw of this football team last year. We couldn't run the ball, and it made that we went past happy, reasonably predictable. But we're not going to have the luxury of a top 5 quarterback, it would seem, on this roster to afford that luxury. What have you seen in the limited padded practices that have been out there that give you hope that we're going to be able to run the ball better this year?
Yeah, so real quick, not to avoid you, because I didn't give you Jordan Jenkins. He was the other one that has stood out to me. He
looks like a monster when you see him walking. He's another physical, imposing guy, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes, and quick, very, very, very quick off the ball. So, and that stands out. He was one of the ones that I was interested to see how he exactly would fit in and would be used and everything. And he's going to be somebody that I think is going to stand out and has stood out to me in pads. I just wanted to wrap that up. But as far as the run game, I think that I'll just say this, because I think that more than anything, Philip Lindsay's prayer. I don't know if we've talked about that enough, just as a collective, not you and I, but just as a collective. Philip Lindsay, 2-time is it 2-time 1,000-yard rusher? I can look it up right now. But this is a guy who for the limited, I think the limited success and he got a limited sample size, but has been successful in the limited sample size, is a guy who probably should have, like, he's not like one of the top backs in the league or anything, but I think he's a lot better than what he ended up getting. The 1 year deal worth
$4 million, something like that.
Yeah. Like that to me could potentially be a steal. And Philip Lindsay has looked very good out there. Now the thing that concerns, so if you're asking for my impressions on the run game, the thing that stands out to me is, hey, you've got to me, a bona fide number one in Philip Lindsay, which I don't think you had last year. You were David and Duke and David Johnson or bust, and neither one of those guys I think is really your 3-down back. Yeah. Whereas I don't know how great of a 3-down back Philip Lindsay can be, but he's better than those guys. And then if you can supplement that with whatever combination of Mark Ingram, David Johnson, and Rex Burkhead you got, I like that. What I don't like, or what I should say I'm still skeptical on, I think I'm sold on the running backs. If Philip Lindsay is the top guy. Yeah. But with the line, that's my issue, right? I don't know, and I'm not necessarily down on it. The offensive line and the musical chairs that they're doing there, I think is where I have pause, and I'm still just hesitant to tell you for sure, hey, this is going to be a better run game. I think they're still figuring things out on the inside. Now, Justin Britt, I think, and I hope he looks nasty out there, scrapping a little bit with Charles Menahue. And, I think that's another guy when you talk about somebody that's got like dog in him, it might sound a little cliche, but that's just a tough dude. So I like him. I think that's an upgraded center, but I don't know exactly what's going on at the guard spots. They're rotating a bunch of guys in there. I'm sure you've seen that Titus has played a lot on the left side at left guard. He did that. Was it the first game he played his rookie year? I think he might have played there.
So he played week 2, didn't he? Against that was Jacksonville, wasn't it?
Jacksonville,
when they went for the 2-point conversion late, and they did run the ball, and then I think they did it week 3 against Carolina as well. And then I think it was week 4, wasn't it, in San Diego, or LA, that they moved when they moved him over to right, and they put Sharpen at left tackle, left guard. Yeah.
So I'm still just trying to figure that out, man. Honestly, like to me, with the line going up against, this offensive line is going up against this defensive line that I just told you I'm impressed with and has looked good and has outplayed them. Yeah. So I can't.
And these are guys who
I feel good about those guys,
Well, that's it, and I think that's the worry, isn't it? Because you think like why was Jordan Jenkins not re-upped in New York on a roster bereft of talent?
Yep.
Why was Philip Lindsay not kept on Denver? And they basically relinquished the restricted tender and let him go without like a really obvious like upside replacement. Oh well, this is the number one. I know Melvin Gordon's there, but he's kind of seen probably better days. But yeah, I think that's the interesting bit. Just before I do have a bit of a theory, but I want to make sure it's not half baked. Dontrell Hilliard, has he been given a fair crack in your eyes from what you've seen? Like they're trying to really work out what he's got.
Not in the 11-on-11s, I don't think.
Okay.
I wouldn't say. Again, to reiterate, that's why I think the preseason is going to be important, because I don't have a great explanation for you on why that is.
Yeah, tight end running backs, I think you can't really tell them until in the preseason.
Yeah. Well, but especially on a team like this, when everybody's a hard scrabble guy, like I was saying before, everybody's trying to go out there and get it. And you got very few guaranteed spots. So yeah, I would say that is a good observation for the preseason games. I asked, gosh, was it? It must have been, maybe it was the special teams coach about, who are the running backs? I was trying to see if I could get a tell out of them about maybe who are the running backs that might be good on special teams, so I could figure out so I could do my process of elimination and nailing down like who's who, you know. And I didn't, obviously I didn't get a straight answer on that, but yeah, I think that's, as far as camp, obviously you see them out there in individual drills, that's when you get to kind of look at everyone, but what is that, So, well, in the team stuff, no, I wouldn't say so.
No, okay. No, I just wondered because I know there was always one that stuck out, that signing, because they brought him in, tried to get him play return game. He sort of said, "I've never done it ever before," but they just stuck me back there. And then he obviously was signed before Caserio signed here. So I just wondered if there was other forces at play there with that one. And I thought that coupled with this seems to be a real, and I know that he looks completely different if you see him even from a clip from a camera phone. Charlie Heck looks a lot different this year, but I just thought, I just thought there was those two, and it was almost like it was being forced and shoehorned in. I wonder if there was maybe a certain individual was trying to force, or that was his or a sign, or a bubbling to the surface of his influence, perhaps, on a fourth round pick on his watch, and he was being made sure he gets a good goal at the expense of probably Titus Howard, who's still not even played 2 full seasons due to injury.
Yeah. I mean, that is so that's another underrated storyline in camp is probably the Charlie Heck at right tackle. That's the coinciding move with bumping Titus Howard inside. And I will say, they gave Charlie, like, I know they were a beaten down team there at the end of the season, but they threw Charlie Heck out there at the end. He was one of the few rookies we got to look at. I don't know if we got much enough of evaluation there, but he played a couple snaps, here and there at the end of the season. And it's somebody that they've talked about, with his dad being Andy Heck, the offensive line coach. I guess he's still in Kansas City.
Yeah, he is.
And you always hear people talking good about Charlie Heck, and then the whole part about him looking different physically. Now, I never got the impression until recently that anybody thought that he could be a better tackle than Titus Howard. And so what I'm trying to understand about what they're doing there is whether what they're doing on the offensive line with bumping Titus Howard in the left guard and keeping and doing this thing with Charlie Heck. Is that more about them feeling like they don't have a solution at left guard and that Charlie Heck can be serviceable and that they can just kind of plug and play him there at right tackle, and that they really need a left guard, like they don't believe in any of the other guys to be the left guard, and they're just moving and they're just moving over Max Sharpen because that's the next best option to try to solidify that side. Is it just a lack of good options? Because to me, conventional wisdom says that, Titus Howard is your obvious right tackle, especially if Marcus Cannon's not out there. So what is Marcus Cannon also? And where does that factor in? Is that really what this is about? And, do they want Marcus Cannon to be their right tackle? And that's why they're bumping in Titus Howard to be the left guard. I mean, there are so many different theories for me there that I really just don't fully understand, other than to say that Titus is a big athletic body who you could, like, in theory, I can see him playing tackle or inside, like physically just looking at the guy. But if a guy is athletic enough to play tackle and can play tackle, play him at that, to me, just in my mind.
Yeah, and I suppose it was maybe a bit of a crash down to earth, and it was all the reports on Saturday night under the lights about I'm getting whipped a couple of times by Jacob Martin. But then, if you go back and watch, I think it was last year or the year, it was a year prior, when you watch Jacob Martin going past, some decent quality right tackles. And I'm pretty sure he went past Braden Smith, who just got a big deal at the Colts, so he's got the speed and the first step quickness to get off the line and catch people cold and beat them around the edge. Maybe not regularly enough as his speed and his athleticism would probably dictate, but I think there's definitely an issue there, or there's definitely a a question of continuity prevails at that spot. And if you were to start the season, albeit, okay, you can run the ball to your left considerably well, providing Tunsil's interested. We've talked about that before. Sometimes he dogs it in the run game. But yeah, you could run the ball really well if they are going outside zone. It gives them, but it gives you a bit of predictability. But then I suppose at the same time, if you're moving Sharpen over again, you're now making 3 changes when you only need to make 2. And you keep the 3 guys and you assume Britt's the starter because it doesn't seem like anybody's really challenging him there. And then you find the best man for the right guard spot. What do you think about the right guard? Just assume that whole jumble of Heck and Howard plays itself out either way. You put those 2 spots to the side. It might be Sharp and left guard. You got to hope so. I think they definitely want it. I've heard Sean Pendergast talking about that. He's been given a good crack at it. But what do you see that sort of right guard spot kind of working out? Because it's so key to running the ball. And if you don't get it down early, it comes back to haunt you. Because I think in 2019, they waited till week 4 or 5 to go with their chosen, and remember, and it's easy to forget Central Henderson was out there week 1. So, I think against the Saints, and so was Cielo Kelementi, and then, he kind of dipped in and out. But what do you see it being if they're going to get the best line out there?
Yeah, so I've watched Max Sharpen over there a little bit, and I honestly think that he could play it, that he could do it. But for me, it is still the biggest question. Like the idea that they have gone from my guy, and I'm blanking on my guy's name from last year that's been Zach Fulton.
Yeah, who's retired by the way.
Yeah, that Zach Fulton, who's now retired. Under 30, I don't know if he's even 30 years old. He might be 30 years old. But to still having not been able to figure that out, I think is, it's concerning. I honestly, I honestly can't tell you who would be the guy outside of Max or exactly how that's gonna play out. Like Ryan McCollum is for the most part a center, and I've watched Ryan McCollum get beat a couple of times by Roy Lopez, as a matter of fact, the rookie, so yeah, could that be, is he more, could he be a guard? I don't know. Like it's the biggest question, honestly, if it's not Max Sharping. And before camp, that's why the whole left guard thing is throwing me off, if I'm honest with you, because before camp, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's going to be Titus at right guard, which, I thought that was also a little bit ridiculous, right? But, maybe that made more sense. Maybe that made more sense as the hodgepodge, and it's not, so.
I just hope they settle. I just hope they settle on 5 and give those guys the best chance. Fair enough, up till preseason week 1, you've got 1 week less than you used to do. So, in the next week or so after this first preseason game, or you might even see them in the first preseason game for the first quarter. So I don't know quite how they'll handle it. Do they just, the 4th preseason game was always the throwaway, wasn't it? And it was just all 3rd and 4th stringers. You didn't see anybody who was ever going to really see the field, in any material capacity. So I don't know. I don't know how you think they'll handle these games, but you've got to think preseason 1 is going to be, your first quarter minimum, maybe even some in the second quarter, slightly less or the same in preseason 2. Then the 3rd game might, go to that. Let's just see if any of these guys can avoid being cut, sort of thing. What, do you think I'll take that sort of shape, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, and I think that the name that we haven't mentioned is Lane Taylor, who could possibly be there. Be your right.
He was left guard, wasn't he? Because I watched 2 games in Green Bay, and he was left guard both those games. But then I've heard people talking about him playing right guard as well. So he probably has done. Yeah. Right.
That's out there. That he could be your right guard. But I mean, I honestly just don't know. But to the point about the preseason, I think it's entertainment value of the preseason, I mean, depends. How much do you get up for the football? But like for a team like this, and I think I don't know if anybody ever took it for granted necessarily, but you get to really get the value of it, and the utility of it. And I think the Texans are probably going to, Mark Vandermeer and John Harris were doing this exercise on the radio this morning where they were trying to figure out or giving their opinion on how long should a guy play, and I get to hear the entire segment, but, do you play Brandon Cooks at all? How many snaps does Philip Lindsay take? You just think you go up and down the line of guys, how long does Zach Cunningham need to be out there, if at all? And you look at the offensive line, and to our conversation here about right guard, well, you want to see all the possibilities, right? You want to see Lane Taylor, Max Sharpen, Cole Toner. I don't know, whoever else is still left on the depth chart, right? You want to see anybody that's a possibility there. What's my guy, Danny Isadora, or is that I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so I apologize if I'm not. But I mean, it's a roll of the dice.
Justin McCray as well was maybe
Justin
people's early
McCray,
favorite for the right guard.
Yeah, Justin McCray. That's another one. Yeah, can't believe I even blanked on that, because that's an actual viable name there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be any of these guys. I mean, that's one of the things to watch for in the preseason games, especially going up against Green Bay. It's like, hey, what do they put out there? Who do they want to watch first? Who's the first guy at right guard that they want to take a look at in their first action with this new coaching staff, these new players, and all of that. So
yeah. So
I think that could be a tell.
No, I think they have to show as you said, they can change in front of the media, they can rotate guys, they can talk about want to see different looks and rotational pieces and trying people out. You can only take 8, probably maybe max 9. All line guys, the defensive line, they're probably going to be 8 or 9 as again. So, there's going to be limited bodies. But so I wrote an article out on Saturday. I'm trying to do sort of short, kind of sharp articles every Saturday. Because I just try and get probably in tune with the modern attention span, perhaps, but just kind of real, easy stuff you can pick up if you've not been following the news that week. You can pick up some stuff. So I grouped some players, and actually I really struggled to fill these and see what you think. So the first grouping players are the guys that were drafted, and it's time to perform. So you probably will see these guys on Saturdays in some variety. So you got Lonnie Johnson, we're number 1, of course, likely strong safety. Ross Blacklock, Jonathan Grenard, Kahali Waring, John Reed, Isaiah Coulter, Charlie Heck. They're all the guys that we've all invested in the last couple of years who pretty much to a man have not given anything on the field worth notable. And I talked about it last week, like if Ross Blacklock had been a 1-year deal last year, it wasn't a second round pick, probably wouldn't have brought him back.
He'd be gone. And based off of performance, he'd be gone.
Yeah.
Now, based off of potential, like, if he's still the same age, let's say, do they bring him back because he's a young guy and they think maybe they can figure it out or coach him up, maybe? But yeah, just based off of performance alone and without all the other things attached to it, the draft pick, where the draft pick came from, all of that, I don't see a reason to bring him back.
And John Grenard's one I think could be on the outside look. Both him and Blacklock, we've got a lot. There's you think a defensive tackle, you got Jaleel Johnson, you got Vincent Taylor, you've got obviously Brandon Dunn coming back, who he's a potential cap saving if he's not up to snuff this year, but just like Whitney Merciless could be, because I don't think they'll be scared and cutting ties if they need to. But yeah, I struggled to kind of fill some of those boxes. So that was the first one out of any of those.
And add guys like Jaleel Johnson, even Roy Lopez, Vincent Taylor. Ross Blacklock has not necessarily separated himself from those guys in camp. I can tell you. Yeah. So that's another interesting thing. Like, he's not. I don't think that guy's getting cut. And I think maybe they probably can use him. At the very least for depth. Yeah. But it is interesting that he would be that would be where you are with him a year later.
And then this next bucket was probably an indictment of the quality of the roster that we've got or we've been left with because of the moves we made. But I talked about players, or the headline was flashed and ready to take a step. And the guys I had there was Chuck Menahu, defensive line, Titus Howard, Max Sharpen, which, 2019 was the flash, I suppose, Pharaoh Brown, and Shaq Lawson, because he's shown some high quality tape, but he's obviously not flashed here. But that was probably the biggest concern to me. Of that should be your biggest bucket of players that you should have more than 5 names to mention there. And I think that's the trouble. Would you add any to that or is that an accurate assumption of the limited array?
This is to
take a step, yeah, giving us something and ready to go, but the extra level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one that to go an extra level would be, I mean, it's got to be Justin Reed.
Well, I put him in a different bucket, but I'll come on to that. So the next one was the prove it contract year, which was Jordan Akins. There you go. Jordan Akins, Kiki QT, Anthony Miller, Justin Reed, and Jacob Martin.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Well, yeah.
And I mean, you could put everybody on this roster probably in the prove it contract year because everybody is probably on there.
Yeah.
You don't perform, you're out. But yeah, I think between those, that's probably the core of your roster. Hopefully, you're going to see the guys who are time to performing take a step, and then that forms the basis of your roster. But I think the fact that it was quite hard to piece those 3 sort of tier 1 and tier 2 players on your roster categories together probably is an indictment of where this roster is, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's just got so much to prove. The early narrative at camp was chip on the shoulder. I got a chip on my shoulder, just like he got a chip on his shoulder, and we all got chips on our shoulders, and we're underrated. Well, you know what? Honestly, they should have chips on their shoulder. This is a kind of a no man's land of a roster. Guys who just kind of fell here. It's always awkward for me during those press conferences when someone will ask, and I've done it a couple of times, ask the question, but a lot of times it's Aaron Wilson actually will ask the question of, what made you decide to come here? Why did you just, why the Texans? I mean, I think it's a fine question for anybody who's a newcomer, who wasn't drafted or traded here, anybody who signed here willingly. And, they always give you, an answer that's, that you can, it's a fine answer, right? Yeah. But it's never what you feel like is the truth, which is, I didn't have a lot of options, or this is where I could get the most money, or something to that effect. Yeah. Because that is the field that either here's the place that would overpay you, a la Randall Cobb last year, Eric Murray last year, or B, I just, wasn't a lot out there for me, to my surprise, a la say of Philip Lindsay. So that's what we're dealing with. That's what this roster is, and that's why this is probably the more exciting preseason that I can remember, in a long time.
So the next bucket is basically that. So guys that are proven that they belong in the league. So it's Des King, Philip Lindsay, Justin Britt, Jordan Jenkins, Malik Collins, Christian Kirksey, Kevin Pierre-Lewis, Justin McCray, Jaleel Johnson, Terrence Mitchell. I did include DeMarcus Walker in there, but again, we're rattling off a hell of a lot of names, all new, but all these guys with something to prove. So you think, I think you'll see the guys who are in the preserve category who get hooked after a series or something. We can probably on Saturday night score them off as they're in the 10 at this stage. But there's a lot of guys there that have all got a lot to prove, and a lot of them coming off injury. Now the next group, I don't know if you want to add anything to those guys first.
Yeah, I think so. Something to prove. That was the category, right?
Well, yeah. Do they belong in the league? Yeah.
Do they belong in the league? Yeah. So I have an awkward one, because he's a proven player, but there is a question at this point: does he belong in the league, and specifically, does he belong in a system like this? But Whitney Merciless is kind of on that list for me.
So
is he on your next?
He's on the next one. So the next one was: do they have anything left in the tank?
Okay,
He
there
was
you
the
go.
first. He was the first name. Whitney Merciless, Liam
Mm,
Taylor, Marcus Cannon. We've not seen either
Marcus
of them
Cannon.
out there.
Yep.
Mark Ingram, David
Mm,
Johnson, Rex Burkhead, and probably a little bit unfairly, but just due to his age and the position that he takes, but Andrew Roberts.
mm. That's a good one.
Because we've committed to Andrew Roberts and we don't know what we're going to get yet. And and I heard him say he wasn't going to give any secrets away about his longevity, but then I thought, well, maybe his blocking was particularly good, and he was just his vision is strong, but he's managed to make a living off some other guys in front of him that have been excellent blocking. But time will tell on that. But yeah, I think, and that's one actually. Do you think? I've held this assertion all offseason. I reckon Merciless will get cut at some point this season. They'll just take the hit.
Yeah, I think that's in play.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's in play. To me, Whitney Merciless was one that I maybe foolishly, but I was willing to take the hit on that after last year. I was like, hey, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, I get the cap hits and the financial implications, but I mean, you can. Yeah, I mean, it's just time to move on. And then what do? They go. Not only is he still around, which I get financial reasons, but they go and change the whole system up and got him doing something they hadn't done in a decade. So I'm very interested how that plays out. Both does he have it? Is it left in the tank? And is, can he adjust and do this thing that he hasn't done in a long time? He's looked all right in camp, but I've also seen, some times where, was it Roderick Johnson that put him on the ground? I don't know. I can't remember exactly now because it was a couple of practices ago. But I've seen him lose some one-on-ones as well, which is not surprising. I mean, I saw him go up against Laramie Tunsil. Obviously, nothing happening there. Like he's not physically strength or speed. He ain't getting around Laramie Tunsil. So I'm just looking like, yeah, is that what's there? Does this change help or hurt? Can this revitalize Whitney Merciless, or is this really just the end the way it appeared to be last year? So
yeah. And then
I don't know what they're gonna do with them, but
I don't think they'll hold back on any guy. Randall Cobb could have been in that category if he was still here. There might, Brandon Dunn might be one. He's another kind of big cap hit if he's not, clearly better than the other guys that have been brought in on a deal, which was probably a bit rich for him. And it was a very early deal that in that free agency cycle, he might be gone as well. So, you just never know where he'll be. And he's come back from an injury as well. And then the final bucket was this was under radar candidates. So do they keep a fullback? It would be Paul Quisenberry at fullback. He's listed a tight end, but he's a fullback. He's been training with James Devlin. Big Z, or is Uzziah Fulahai? I think I pronounced that all right, because he was the only guy that could get off a block at the end of last season. And then another one was, which is a bit of a long shot, but I think it's just one of these guys that you would love to have in special teams because he's tactical now. But Shyam Carter, just coming up, obviously he was on the coaching staff at Alabama, got in the tryout. Because you think there's been a lot of guys that have come in on tryouts. Corey Moore was a good example of that. I know he kind of infamously dropped that interception in 2017 of Tom Brady, but iced the game. But he was a tryout guy, and there's been many other examples of tryout guys that have kept on the roster and hung around because there was something they liked about them. But have you got any guys apart from them, Brandon, or the ones we've not touched on today that you think might be worth a mention before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm glad I got in Jordan Jenkins earlier because I think that he can be a factor in terms of the pass rush, and that being them having almost no pass rush last year outside of whenever JJ Watt might show some flashes, but they essentially had none. I'm trying to think of some players, man. I think that we talked about Anthony Miller. I do want to reiterate how much I just like that they essentially made that swap, man. I know we talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
But the upgrade, I think, from Randall Cobb to Anthony Miller is going to be not insignificant. I think you're gonna notice that, and it's gonna help a lot for whoever the quarterback is, which we again think is gonna be Tyrod Taylor. And Nico Collins, man, I know we had talked about him earlier, but I mean, if there is anything to overreact to, because I think that's a lot of what camp is, and I've had fun out there, but a lot of this is overreaction. You did it. You just showed a while ago a lot of the headlines that came out of camp last year that now sound utterly ridiculous. But if there's anything to overreact to right now, it is Nico Collins. I think that he looks, he looks different and is like the kind of receiver that the Texans I don't think have had in a while. Obviously, you had DeAndre Hopkins, who had the amazing catch radius that he had and amazing hands that he had, but just the physical stature of this guy, the athletic ability, his route running is even better in person than what I could tell on film when I watched, the film that I watched of him. And they talk about consistency, wanting to see more of that throughout, from all of the rookies. And he is the most consistent rookie that I've watched of the group. And so, I mean, again, I know we talked about him earlier, but I would just reiterate that this is a guy, number 17. Have your eye on this guy.
Right, I got three quick questions just on the roster before we show you here. We'll do quick fire. Right, running backs. Does Mark Ingram make this roster?
So I'll throw a little curveball at you real quick since you asked. And I'm taking this a little bit from Seth Payne here at Sports Radio 610, original Texan Seth Payne. He thinks one of these guys could be trade bait. Now, I don't know what the trade value is in any of those guys, considering that they were
a swap.
Right.
A swap.
Yeah, I mean, they were able to sign these guys for nothing. David Johnson, overpaid, all of that. So, I don't know who exactly. I don't see the trade scenario, but again, could you get lucky? Is there a powerful person who believes in Mark Ingram? Yeah, I mean, is there a powerful person who believes in Mark Ingram more than they should? Or, I like it. And the idea of trading for David Johnson, or like Rex Burkhead, I mean, I don't see that out there. And of course, Phillip Lindsay is your best option at running back. So unless you're trading for a better running back, I don't see what that is, or the sense that makes. I think that if he doesn't get traded, that Mark Ingram does make the roster. Now that does create a crowded running back situation, because I also think that David Johnson is going to be on the roster. I also think that Phillip Lindsay is going to be the number one running back. So then that leaves me with trying to figure out the Rex Burkhead thing, and is like who's the fourth back? Is that a practice squad guy, a special teams guy? Who? How does that shake out? How does the bottom of the depth chart for the running back shake out if Mark Ingram does make it, which I do think he will?
In terms of the linebackers, obviously Kirksey's got the green dot on the back of the helmet. I think so he's going to get the plays into his helmet. Assuming Cunningham plays the will, who's starting at Sam?
Kevin Pierre. Yeah, Kevin Pierre-Louis.
Yeah,
Kevin Pierre-Louis is starting at Sam, but based off of camp. Now, I don't have a super in-depth evaluation on who's the best guy based off of camp, but based off of the reps, that seems to be the way that they're leaning. So I would expect that to be the case there.
In all the defensive ends, if you think they're going to keep Lawson, Jordan Jenkins, Grenard probably sticks around.
Yeah.
Jacob Martin's a speed change-up guy. There's four. You might keep five. Who's the fifth if you keep those four?
Yeah, I mean, Omenihu is going to be there. Did you mention him?
Well, I was maybe going to class him as an interior guy because he'll probably bump out onto the edge when he on later downs, maybe.
Yeah. So right. He'll bump inside when they want to just go all pass rushers. In obvious passing downs. All right, so give that to me again. Let me process that one more time.
So you got Lawson, Jacob Martin, Jonathan Grenard, Jordan Jenkins. That's four. You're only ever going to have two, ideally, on the field at once. So you think you maybe keep five max. doesn't look that good for Whitney Merciless, does it? I suppose. Because you got DeMarcus Walker in there, you got Derek Rivers.
Yeah, Derek. I was gonna say Derek Rivers is, and Derek Rivers has the Easterby connection.
Yeah.
and for what it's worth, hasn't looked terrible in camp. Derek Rivers has looked fine. I go Merciless.
Yeah, I think it's a real possibility because I think all the players at this time of year say, I've shifted 10, 15 pounds. But then I think even his first interview was saying, well, I've got my hand in the dirt. I can't see what's going on. So
Yep. And he told me that. I asked him straight up. I said, what's the biggest difference? I can't see nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, great talk.
Yeah. And final one, I lied, but final one we get out. Over under how many players do you think they pick up at the waiver wire, knowing how much Caserio likes a transaction and how many of them will be a quarterback?
Well, over under. I'll say this. I'll answer the last one first while I'm thinking about the first one. At least one.
Yeah, I think they might even do three because if you think even the 2019 roster, they picked up Buddy Hill.
I meant on the quarterback. At least one.
Oh, right. Well, at least one quarterback. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, because like Jeff Driscoll is practice squad or a cut. So that could very easily be a cut, and then they bring in another guy.
Yeah.
And who knows what they do with Davis Mills? Maybe he's practice squad. Maybe they bring in an actual backup. If Davis Mills isn't ready. So one of them could be a quarterback. Over under how many they pick? Yeah, I know you gave out 3. Could be, man, because I'm trying to think what do we think they're gonna need? I had to think that through.
I think they got to look at another corner. I don't know how they've not, or how they think they've got away with adding that, or without adding that this year. I think they're probably short. I think they would take a wide receiver if one felt them, an outside guy, because you seen them taking VZ, came in late.
Yeah.
And I think they're always open to guys up front, whether that be defensive or offensive.
Yeah.
So I think 2 or 3.
Yeah. I'll say even 4.
Yeah.
I'll even go 4
because they're not tied to any of these guys. Very few of them they've got any connection with. I don't think they're.
I could see Caserio getting happy. Yeah, I'd go 4. Maybe it's 4. Why not?
Yeah. I think it's changed days, isn't it? I think you got 16-man practice squad. I think it's been wholly confirmed, but you got that to deal with. And then I think you've got an understanding of or a big change from the previous regime of we like our guys, and that was much to their detriment. But I think it's been probably over churn at times. But I think in this season, if it was ever a time to do it, it's this year, isn't it? So we're well over time here, mate. So we'll let you get out of here. But do the final question, and we'll leave it at this: do they keep Deshaun on the 53 as it stands right now, in the hope that he'll be on some sort of exempt list, because the league aren't moving very quickly, and I think it took them to July to interview even him or even speak to him. So at that rate, I don't think you can bank on that. So what do they do? Because obviously you've got to keep him. You've got to keep on somewhere without letting him walk for free. So where does he sit on this? Because then you're one roster spot down, which is a big deal when you've only got 53, 46 to suit up on game day.
Yeah, no, Deshaun's on the 53, man. Deshaun's on the team. Now, what that looks like past that, and for all the rest of us, and the optics and the logistics of it exactly, I am very much interested to find out myself. But I mean, everything that we've seen so far indicates that they are. Like, I can't speak to, and I have heard some of the same reports and the chatter out there that they have made these last ditch efforts, like the reports you hear about them trying to sell the team on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Those are, go with that. Those are pretty solid from what I can tell. So with that being the case, they still appear to like, and I love John McClain, but he's out there saying that they don't want him anymore. I don't see that. I don't see the Like I see more of the reports of, they would like to get him in the fold if they can convince him.
Yeah.
I thought about, and this was small, but I even blogged about it because it stood out to me. But when Anthony Miller was on In the Loops had a player after a practice.
Yeah, every day. Yeah.
They just happened to be broadcasting at that time. So Anthony Miller, who obviously is a newcomer, a new teammate of Deshaun Watson, has not played a game with him. They asked him about it anyway, and he gave to me what I thought was, and I could be reading too much into it, but he acknowledged. He says, it certainly affects the team if he plays. And to me, it almost was the first or the most standout comment of if he plays, here's a guy that just got here who seems to be leaving the door open for the possibility that Deshaun Watson could play. It certainly affects the team if he plays, but however it may go, the show must go on. That was the quote. So, I'm like, oh man, it sounds like they want this guy around. And I've said this consistently, and it's just a fact. They own his contract. They got the rights to him, like they don't have to do anything here. I think in the narrative business, it's been sold, I think, to the public that, well, Deshaun Watson wants out. And so that means he's just going to be gone, and you just got to trade him. And it's like, yeah, well, disgruntled superstar, not ideal. Probably do have to trade your disgruntled superstar at some point, but you actually really don't. When a guy just signed a contract, it's going to be a year ago now. It's about 11 months ago. Hey, man, if they don't like the offers, if they're not getting any offers, sorry, Deshaun, like you either got to come and play or do what else. Like that has always been my question to Deshaun Watson. Like I'm thinking, hey man, play football or do what exactly? I mean, I get being rich and not having to report to work and getting paid. As a matter of fact, I was having this debate. I don't think we got far in the debate because we had something to do with Aaron Wilson and I, who covers the Texans as well. We're talking like, his point is, well, why play? Because he doesn't want to be there. It doesn't make sense for him to play. He wants to get traded. And my thought was, why not play? Because and do what? If the league says you can play, okay, you're not suspended.
Yeah.
If they don't put you on the exempt list or none of that. Now, if you can go on the exempt list, that's hey, right. That, obviously, he'll be on the roster and he'll be at home and he won't have to play. The conversation is moot. But if he's allowed to play, I don't get taking a year off at 25, going to be 26 years old. This is what you do, like this is your legacy. This is who you are. The idea that you would just not play because because just pout and because Cal McNair, you don't have the greatest respect for your boss. Look, man,
no one does. Get in the lane.
and forget it. Cal McNair aside, forget that. There are a lot of us out here making a lot less money working for people that we don't respect necessarily or have done it at times. Like, you think everybody out here thinks that their boss is a genius or wants to work for the person that they work for, the company that they work for, or whatever it is, and here's Deshaun Watson getting $10.5 million to work for somebody that he supposedly doesn't really respect or an organization that he doesn't really believe in. Look, man, if it's a situation where they can't trade him this year and he's allowed to play, I'm very interested to see how that plays out, because I don't see how you don't play. I don't see how you don't play if you're allowed and you're on a team. You play.
Yeah.
You're a football player. You play football, man. Like there's not a contract dispute. You're getting paid,
Well, I heard somebody mention that there was almost an intimation that if he was to move somewhere, he'd look to get his contract reworked. I thought, it's obvious he's been advised terribly and he continues to be and he's obviously surrounds himself with enablers and people who, you know, don't necessarily always have his best interest at heart. Whether that's his, you know, his smug agent, whether that's his, whether that's, you know, his other half who he had to buy a perfume line for. You know, I'm assuming that was something part of the counselling or whatever kind of you know, sessions they went through after all this kind of stuff. So
I will say that, look, I don't dabble in this world, the social media influencer world, but I've always wanted to point out whenever someone with Jilly, the girlfriend, I think it's worth noting, she is actually more internet famous than he is.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay, right, okay.
Like we love football, and to us, Deshaun Watson is the star. There's a whole nother avenue and lane and world that exists where she is actually the star, and it's like,
really?
who's Deshaun Watson? Go look up. I mean, if you go look at her Instagram followers, she's got more than he does.
All right, okay.
She's got more than he does. So, like, I don't know the world that this is happening in, or I'm just learning about it because she's with him and or whatever.
Yeah,
but
okay.
She's a thing. You know, she's the the post Kardashian world of influencer, just being famous for being famous and beautiful and whatever it may be.
Yeah,
and being able to monetize that, she's on that track. So I don't know if he had anything to do with the perfume line. The time is curious though, you know, because
the timing wasn't the best. But yeah, I think
I think he's on the roster though. To answer your question, though, I do think he's on the 53 man.
I think he is. I think you just have to deal with it and grin and bear it. But I think I talked about that last week. I think the Watson camp have been shocked by the Texans' ability to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think they just thought they would cave regardless of the thing. And it's always that overriding arrogance that is getting more palpable as time goes on through this whole thing. That it almost loosens the bedrocks of their position as they're standing there, because I think they assumed that they would get their way. And I don't know if that's from the agent or that's from the business manager, or is that from, you know, guy X, Y, and Z that's always hanging around with them? Is that Quincy Avery? Is that whoever it is? I think there's just been so much pitter patter of little voices and all this kind of stuff that swirls around, and all of 99% of it's, you know, a crock of shit. But the truth of the matter is, he's not going anywhere anytime soon, unless a GM gets trigger happy and his owner goes, you know, I might die before we win a Super Bowl. Let's just go for it. You know, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a structural shift so big, you know, like, you know, so these big trades that people always look back on. It's going to take that for it to change. And I just can't see anybody doing that with a looming suspension, with what the Texans should get when they don't have to do anything. Sitting back and letting the market come to you, for which is a 15-year investment for somebody that's got a higher yield than pretty much 90% of the other available assets out there. Just sit back, sit pretty, and wait for it to come to you. You don't need to make a move.
I think Watson's camp decided that Cal McNair was a weak leader.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with that or not is up to you. But I think that's what they decided. They said, hey, we don't believe. We don't believe in leadership. And we see a weak leader. And like you just said, we'll bulldoze them. We'll railroad them. They're not going to be able to withstand the pressure that we're going to put on the organization. And they did not possibly give enough credit to the poker face that Nick Caserio would put up. And I'm not trying to give too much credit to Nick Caserio necessarily, because I think that circumstance is also factored into this as well. You know, like a big reason why we are here. And Watson is somewhat untouchable. Like, he's already on the Texans. So there that is. But the reason why he's untouchable for a lot of these other teams is for this off the field reason and these serious allegations, things that people don't want to be tied to, especially in today's environment and political climate. And I'm not trying to make an excuse and say that's the only good reason to feel this way. Like, these things are valid, but there's a heightened awareness and sensitivity to violence against women, crimes against women, these sorts of things. Is that, and then the quarterback, you know, this isn't bringing in Greg Hardy. You know, the quarterback is the face of the franchise. So, you know, is it easier for the Texans to redeem the disgraced face of the franchise than it is for the other team to go all in and give you 3-4 first round, whatever it is, whatever the asking price is, to give you that for someone that they're not even sure they can put on a poster, for someone they're not even sure that they can put in a commercial, at least not right now. They know they can't right now, and that is the hesitation. I think that, this is in some ways, this is going to sound a little twisted, but the Texans got a little bit lucky here in that there's an obstacle in the trade market for Deshaun Watson, and that's if they want to keep him, and if you agree with what I think is conventional wisdom that Deshaun Watson is the best option for them at quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I think that the arrogance of the camp was exposed quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially when you look back in the context of that they knew what was going on in the background with the personal life. Maybe they didn't know that it was about to hit the fan like it did.
They knew.
Well, they didn't know that they were going to have an onslaught of,
but it goes back to that arrogance thing, doesn't it? They just assumed that they could get by it. Yeah.
Yes.
Who are you to tell us?
The whole thing from the allegations themselves, the nature of the allegations themselves, to the way that it's played out with his camp, like from Deshaun and the moment of how he's supposedly allegedly getting down, all the way to the end of it, to how the camp has handled it, has shown a great level of arrogance. Yeah. But at the time when the trade request was made, you think, hey, he had a point. I thought he had a point. Like, hey, look, this ain't working. These guys don't know what they're doing. I want out of here. Now, I think where they went wrong was not even trying to do the basically do the communication or like honest communication and open communication, which I don't know the extent of that, but it didn't seem like he kind of ever gave the new regime a chance.
Yeah,
and
it all went through ESPN, didn't it? That was all the
right. And now he's being forced to do that. Like he might still want to get traded, but he is being forced to, at the very least, listen to Nick Caserio, listen to the teammates that that are left over and that have been brought in that want him to still play. Like he's got to at the very least listen or go home and take that $50,000 fine.
Yeah, I think the team have got decisions. You either try and integrate them, even if it is third stretch, third tier, and you make a call. You either just they can either now let him sit him rot, whether that's suspension or just as a 53rd man, and he just doesn't get dressed. We're just say, look, this is nobody likes this, but nobody's willing to pay the price. So you're nobody pays the bond. Nobody's come up with the bond yet, so you're here whether you like it or not, unfortunately. Or you can do what you do best, and you've done your entire life, and you can buckle up that chin strap and go and throw the ball around for this team better than it probably 99.99% of humans on this earth can do. So what's up to you? What do you want to do? But you just never know what's in his ear, and it's obviously bad advice in his ear, and it continues to be bad advice in his ear.
Yeah,
and we'll see. And whether that public stand today was with Caserio was intentional, right in front of the media, or it just so happened that they just started talking right in front of everybody. We don't know, but well over probably a double time there, Brandon. But thank you very much for your time. Any words before we head out of here? I'm probably going to get you caught up in some rush hour traffic now.
Oh, it's cool, man. I'll probably sit around and do some work. I have another hour before I need to pick up my daughter. So, but I'm actually good in the rush hour traffic, man. Sometimes it's therapeutic for me. I go back, I'll do some prep. I try to. You hear so many stories. I don't know if you see this out here. We hear so many stories about road rage and people just and so much angst on the road.
I've seen more than a fair share of crashes in the limited time.
Oh man, it's ridiculous. So like for me, I'm just like, okay, there's nothing I can do about the traffic. If I run into it, I'm gonna try to just enjoy this quiet time or listen to a podcast or an album that I hadn't caught up on or something like that. So. It's all good, man. This is always fun, to kind of talk through it the long form way, of every aspect of the team and try to make sense of everything.
Yeah, no, I think so, and it continues to be confusing having Deshaun hang around when it would seem simpler for him to be out the limelight. But yeah, they're finding their own way. First time GM, first time head coach. But we'll have a game and we'll finally have something this offseason materially to judge them on, because the acid test goes in between the white lines. All the other stuff's just preparation of that. So looking forward to Green Bay on Friday. I take it, are you watching it from Houston, or what's your vantage point Saturday?
Yeah, I'll be watching it from Houston. We obviously are going to broadcast the game through Sports Radio 610, so I'll be connected one way or the other. But I'll be here in Houston, and the first time I'll travel will more than likely be to AT&T Stadium to check out the in-state rivalry and see what that's looking like. But I'll be for sure communicating with people there as things are happening. The Mark Vandermeers and John Harris's of the world, and John McClain's, and whoever else is there.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the team prepare under a new regime. It's all different, it's all new, so there's 101 things to watch. Hopefully we've covered some of those tonight, and we'll look forward to finally having football, the whole point of this team, even though they've made a focus on anything but. But Brandon, thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch up with you at some point during the season.
Oh, I'm sure of it. We'll have a lot to talk about.